I knew my life was about to explode the moment my boss leaned across the conference table and whispered, "People like you don't last long here." My name is Daniel Ortiz, Senior Financial Analyst at Brathmore & Cole Global, a Fortune 500 monster of a corporation where reputations are currency and fear is management's favorite tool. I'd survived tight deadlines, mergers, and 2 CEOs. But nothing prepared me for Harlan Pierce, the Director of Operations and, unfortunately, my new direct supervisor. Harlan was the kind of corporate legend whispered about in break rooms, razor-smiled, immaculately suited, and rumored to have destroyed more careers than the 2008 recession. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His power lived in the way people shrank when he entered a room. When he arrived 3 months ago, he shook my hand like he owned me already. "Daniel, right? I've heard you're competent." Not great. Not talented. Competent. It was his way of telling me my ceiling was whatever height he chose. Still, at first, our dynamic seemed tolerable. I handled the quarterly forecasting models. He took credit for them. I stayed late building slide decks. He presented them with my notes still on the margins. It wasn't fair, but it was corporate life, and I convinced myself it was temporary, just until he settled in. But Harlan wasn't settling. He was scouting. And I was his next target. The shift started subtly. A forgotten invitation to a strategy meeting. A project reassigned without explanation. My name mysteriously disappearing from email chains I should have been copied on. When I brought it up, Harlan smiled, that tight, metallic smile that never reached his eyes. "Don't overthink it, Danny. Focus on the work I do give you." Danny. I hated that. Coworkers began avoiding me the way people avoid someone standing too close to a lightning rod. Conversations died when I walked into the break room. My mentor, Claire, pulled me aside after a weekly department briefing and whispered, "Just keep your head down." His testing boundaries. Testing boundaries? It felt like he was mapping out exactly how to bury me. Still, I tried to chalk it up to paranoia. A new boss gets leeway, right? Maybe he genuinely was reorganizing things. Maybe the cold shoulders from colleagues were coincidence. Maybe the missing emails were an IT glitch. But then, during a Friday evening review session, when most sane people had already escaped the building, Harlan closed the door, adjusted his cufflinks, and stared at me with predatory calm. "Daniel," he said, tapping my performance file, "we need to discuss your decline." My decline? Something twisted in my gut. On the surface his tone was smooth, professional, almost gentle. But underneath, something was very, very wrong. "You said." I stared across the desk at Harlan, still trying to decide if I'd heard him correctly. "My decline." I repeated. He folded his hands like a disappointed guidance counselor. "Your numbers, Daniel. They've been sloppy. Off. Not up to the standard this department requires." My pulse thudded. "My reports have been spotless. You signed off on them yourself." A soft chuckle escaped him, one that somehow felt like a threat. "Let's not get defensive. I'm giving you a chance to course correct." Course correct. I'd been carrying half the department for months. Still, he dismissed me with a graceful flick of his wrist, and I left his office feeling as if I'd stepped into a parallel universe, one where facts bent around him like metal around a magnet. The next week only made things stranger. We had a new intern in our department, Lucas. Fresh out of grad school, hyper-confident, the kind of kid who wore $500 loafers like they were gym shoes. Nothing wrong with him, except that Harlan adored him. Overnight, Lucas had access to high-level strategy meetings I hadn't even been invited to. He sat in Harlan's office for hours with the door closed, emerging with a grin like he'd been let in on a secret that the rest of us weren't worthy of. Meanwhile, Harlan suddenly wanted me to mentor Lucas, which actually meant cleaning up the intern's chaotic spreadsheets so Harlan wouldn't see the errors. "Just support him," Harlan said. "He has potential." Potential for what, exactly? Around this time, I noticed something wrong with the departmental expense reports. Amounts didn't match. Figures had been overwritten, subtly, but unmistakably. When I asked our finance liaison, she frowned and said, "Didn't Harlan tell you?" He personally updated those. He hadn't. And when I double-checked the system logs, someone had accessed my account after hours using my credentials. My stomach churned. During a team presentation, Harlan announced a new optimization model we would be implementing immediately. It was my model, my code, my projections, but he claimed Lucas had built it under his close supervision. The room clapped. Lucas nodded humbly, and I sat there, silently burning. Afterward, I confronted Lucas. Why would you take credit for my work? He blinked. Dude, Harlan told me you didn't want your name on it. Said you were overwhelmed. Overwhelmed? I hadn't taken a sick day in 5 years. I didn't sleep that week. My mind kept rewinding through every shift in tone, every vanished email, every erased credit. I felt like I was being slowly erased, too, scrubbed out of my own career. But the worst part wasn't the paranoia. It was the sickening thought that maybe, just maybe, I was only seeing the smoke. And the real fire hadn't even started yet. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. Ironically, the kind of quiet, uneventful day when you least expect someone to take a sledgehammer to your life. I walked into the office, coffee in hand, ready to tune out the usual corporate chaos. But something was off. People were staring at me, not the nervous sideways glances I'd grown used to, but something colder. Pity, disgust, fear. I didn't have time to decode it, because HR emailed me a meeting request. Mandatory. Immediate. No agenda. My heartbeat lurched. I made my way to the glass conference room, where 2 HR representatives were waiting, along with, of course, Harlan. He greeted me with a gentle nod, as if this were a parent-teacher conference and not my own execution. Daniel, the HR director began, folding her hands. We've received reports of data manipulation in the quarterly forecasts. The irregularities were traced back to your login credentials. My vision tunneled. What? No, there's been some mistake. I haven't altered anything. She slid a printed report toward me. I recognized the formatting immediately. It was my forecasting model, except every major metric had been distorted to show inflated projections. Numbers so bad they'd misled the board into approving a disastrous product launch. This was submitted under your username, she said gently, and we've confirmed several unauthorized after-hours logins from your account. My mouth went dry. Someone used my credentials. I reported this to finance last week. That's when Harlan leaned in, wearing that perfectly neutral mask he'd mastered. Daniel, he said softly, Lucas told me you were feeling overwhelmed. That maybe you rushed something. We all make mistakes. But intentionally altering financial statements, that puts the entire company at risk. I felt the breath ripped from my lungs. He'd done it. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. This was a setup. I didn't do this, I whispered, hands trembling. You know I didn't. For the first time, I saw something shift in Harlan's eyes. Not guilt. Not hesitation. Victory. And that was when it hit me, why the favoritism, why the secret meetings with Lucas, why my projects kept vanishing, why my login had been used after hours. He'd been grooming a scapegoat. And I was the perfect candidate, hardworking, quiet, trusted. Someone the company would never suspect, until every piece of evidence pointed straight at me. HR wasn't finished. Given the severity of this breach, we're placing you on immediate suspension pending further investigation. Security will escort you out. My heart shattered. Rage, disbelief, humiliation, they all crashed into me with suffocating force. I looked at Harlan, my betrayer, my corporate executioner. How long have you been planning this? I asked, voice barely audible. He smiled politely. Let's keep emotions out of this, Daniel. But as security took my badge and led me away, one thing burned hotter than the humiliation. He thought I'd go quietly. He had no idea what I was about to do next. The walk from the glass conference room to the elevator felt like a funeral procession. My funeral. Security flanked me on both sides, polite but firm, as if I was some criminal instead of the guy who'd given 6 years of his life to Brathmore and Cole without a single complaint. Every step echoed with the same thought. How could he do this to me? By the time the elevator doors slid shut, the question twisted into something uglier, sharper. Why did I let him? When the elevator reached the lobby, they returned my messenger bag, emptied, inspected, humiliated. My ID badge was gone. My access revoked. My identity within that building erased. I walked out into the cold air, numb and hollow. It wasn't until I reached the parking garage, dark, quiet, smelling faintly of oil and dust, that the numbness cracked. I slumped against my car, and every bottled emotion hit at once. The humiliation. The disbelief. The betrayal so sharp it felt physical. I'd played by the rules. I'd done everything right. And Harlan had still buried a knife between my ribs, smiling the entire time. My hands shook violently as I pulled out my phone. Notifications flashed, texts from colleagues, mostly hesitant versions of "I'm so sorry, let me know if I can help, be careful what you say," all of them afraid. All of them convinced I was finished. I almost believed it too, until I saw Claire's message at the bottom. "Check your personal email. Now." See. I opened my inbox with trembling fingers. Claire had sent me a folder of attachments, each labeled meticulously. Access logs, unusual activity, executive meeting minutes, pre-forecast approval, budget variances, altered entries, Lucas_chat_transcript.pdf. With one click, the truth spilled out. Harlan had been planting evidence for weeks. Not sloppy mistakes, strategic changes. Edits made at times I wasn't even in the building. Credentials used from workstations I had never touched. And in those chat transcripts, Lucas, bragging to someone that the director says once this is over, I'm guaranteed a permanent role. My chest tightened. So it wasn't just sabotage, it was a full-blown power play. A manufactured fall guy. A career execution designed to make Harlan look like the brilliant leader who caught the problem. I felt the anger rise, not wild, not chaotic, but something steadier. Hot. Controlled. For the first time since the suspension, I could breathe. I scrolled through every document, every manipulated number, every timestamp that proved I was being framed. The fear that had clung to me like a second skin began to peel away. And in its place grew something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. Harlan hadn't destroyed my career. Not yet. He'd only declared war. And standing alone in that dim parking garage, with the evidence glowing on my phone screen, I made a decision that snapped something deep inside me into focus. I was done playing victim. If Harlan wanted a corporate execution, he was about to find out I wasn't the one on the chopping block. He was. I didn't want fireworks. I wanted a clean, legal takedown, beautiful in its precision, ugly in its consequence. If Harlan had built a case on fabricated logs, stolen credentials, and a hired scapegoat, then I would unbuild it with evidence so mundane and thorough that even his polished smile couldn't gloss it over. I copied every file Claire had sent to a secure personal drive and took screenshots of the timestamps. Then I pulled my own archives, old versions of forecasts, email threads, and version control check-ins showing edit histories. If Harlan had altered numbers, I wanted the original numbers in my hand, and metadata that proved it. I mapped everything, meetings, logins, edits, onto a single timeline. Dates, times, machine IDs. The pattern was ugly and obvious when it was laid out. Access spikes at 11:47 p.m. on nights I'd been home. Edits made from a workstation in Harlan's office. Lucas' sudden appearances right after each adjustment. Patterns kill plausible deniability. Claire agreed to talk, but not publicly. She fed me small confirmations, an offhand comment Harlan made in the cafeteria, the time she saw Lucas leaving Harlan's office at 2 in the morning. I quietly messaged 2 other teammates who had been reassigned or sidelined. People were scared, but fear has a price. A few were willing to say, under oath, that meetings happened that HR wasn't told about. I contacted an employment attorney, one recommended by a family friend. I didn't go to HR first. HR was already complicit, or so I suspected. The lawyer's first move was to draft a formal preservation letter demanding the company preserve all logs, emails, and devices related to the case. That letter buys you time and creates a paper trail that, strangely, companies hate to ignore. If Harlan thought I'd disappeared, he'd relax. So I leaked nothing, but I acted like I was reeling, posting muted, angry but vague messages on a private LinkedIn thread that a few ex-colleagues followed. I knew he watched social signals. I wanted him to feel the security of victory. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed a formal complaint with corporate compliance and hinted at external escalation if the matter wasn't handled impartially. With the preservation letter sent and witnesses prepped, the lawyer requested an independent forensic audit. That's where metadata matters, the kind Harlan thought he'd scrubbed. Forensic experts would extract deleted entries, match IPs to office machines, and reconstruct the after-hours access. If Lucas and Harlan had been sloppy, the audit would make them look sloppy on paper. If they'd been careful, inertia and fear might force them into mistakes. Harlan still walked the halls like a king. He smiled at emails, added Lucas to more committees, and gave motivational speeches about integrity. The irony wasn't lost on me. But kings stumble when the ground beneath them is hollowed out with evidence. I wasn't done building that hollow. Every call I made, every document I saved, every quiet conversation I had was another chisel stroke. The trap wasn't loud. It was inevitable. The showdown came faster than I expected. 2 weeks after my suspension, Brathmore and Cole announced an emergency board meeting, mandatory, confidential, and crisis-related. My lawyer called me the same morning. "They've seen the preservation letter," she said. "And someone inside leaked word of your evidence. They're rattled. Today's the day." My pulse surged. This was it. We arrived at headquarters together, escorted not by security this time, but by the company's chief compliance officer, the same woman who'd avoided eye contact the day HR walked me out. Now, she couldn't look away. The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and power, a place where fortunes shifted in silence. Today, silence was impossible. Harlan sat at the head of the table, perfectly groomed, confident, Lucas at his side like a shadow waiting for instructions. He didn't even acknowledge me when I walked in. He didn't have to. In his mind, this was a formality, a final swat to silence a mosquito. Then the forensic auditor entered. That wiped the smirk off his face. A middle-aged man with a tired suit and a voice like gravel, he opened his laptop and projected the first slide. An authorized access log, full reconstruction. Every login. Every timestamp. Color-coded. Cross-referenced. Machine IDs, keycard scans, security footage stills. The truth unfolded like a slow-motion explosion. "Mr. Pierce," the auditor said calmly, "these after-hours entries came from the workstation in your private office. They cannot be attributed to Mr. Ortiz." Harlan straightened, nostrils flaring. Then someone spoofed. The next slide cut him off. User credential usage, authentication pattern analysis. It showed 2 distinct typing rhythms logged by the system, mine and someone else's. Someone who typed nearly 40% slower. Someone who wasn't me. Lucas swallowed hard. The auditor continued, unhurried, almost bored. "We also recovered deleted versions of the altered forecast files from your office drive. They were saved during periods when security cameras show only you and Mr. Fisher," he gestured to Lucas, inside. A murmur rippled around the table. Then came the final blow. Chat transcript recovery. The board watched as Lucas' messages popped up on the screen. Harlan says once the model tanks and Ortiz takes the fall, the director title is basically mine. "We'll blame the numbers on him. Easy win." Lucas turned ghost white. Harlan lunged to mute the screen. This was taken out of context. "No," the compliance officer's voice sliced through the room. "This is context." Then my lawyer stood, cool and precise. "Brathmore and Cole knowingly suspended an innocent employee based on manipulated evidence. We are prepared to escalate this to the SEC unless an immediate remedy is enacted." For a long, electric moment, the room froze. Then the board chair looked at Harlan with a calm I will never forget. "Mr. Pierce, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. And expect a formal investigation into criminal misconduct." It was the reverse of my suspension, except this time, the right man was losing everything. His title, his reputation, his career. As security approached him, Harlan finally looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw it. Fear. The corporate bully had never expected resistance from the man he tried to erase. But I didn't erase easily. And this wasn't over yet. The board meeting ended with a kind of stunned silence, one that felt less like shock and more like collective awakening. For months, everyone had felt the tension, the unease, the unspoken threat hanging over the department. Now they finally saw the source. And they finally saw me. As Harlan was escorted out, jaw clenched, eyes flat, ego shattered, something strange happened. Employees stepped aside, not out of fear but out of recognition. His reign of intimidation was over. The giant had fallen, and the ground no longer shook beneath him. Lucas followed shortly after, shaking and mumbling excuses no one bothered to hear. HR fired him on the spot. Not even security wanted to look at him as they walked him out. My lawyer and I stayed behind to finalize the details. The board apologized, awkwardly, earnestly, and rescinded my suspension. They offered reinstatement, back pay, and a promotion should I wish to return. But as I looked around that gleaming conference room, I realized something. I didn't want to return. This place had taken too much from me already. So I accepted the apology, not the offer. Over the next few weeks, news of Harlan's termination spread, not just internally but across the industry. A director ousted for falsifying financial records. Companies whispered. Recruiters hesitated. Word traveled fast in corporate circles, faster when the SEC began their formal inquiry. His immaculate reputation was gone. No amount of tailoring or charisma could stitch it back together. Claire later told me he tried blaming a rogue intern in the initial hearing. Lucas tried blaming stress. The investigators blamed the evidence. And the evidence was mine. As for me, I took time off. Real time. I slept. I rebuilt my life. I shook off the weight of the months I'd spent doubting myself. I met with companies who valued integrity, mine, not the hollow version Harlan tried to paint. When I finally accepted a new job, the hiring director looked at me and said, "Anyone who can survive that storm and walk out cleaner than the sky afterward. We want that kind of grit here." And I believed him. I wasn't the man Harlan tried to bury. I was the man who climbed out and brought the whole mountain down with him. On my last day before starting the new role, I stood outside the Brathmore and Cole building one final time. The same doors I'd been escorted through in shame now meant nothing to me. I smiled. Sometimes poetic justice isn't about revenge. It's about watching the man who tried to end your career lose his own by the same blade he sharpened. If you've ever dealt with a workplace bully, or someone who tried to sabotage you, tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next.